There is a voice in your head that has never once been interviewed. It has narrated every failure, every mistake, every moment you fell short, for years, maybe decades, and you have never once stopped to ask who actually gave it the authority to speak. You assume it's you. It isn't, not entirely. Most of what it says, you didn't write. Stay, and you'll learn how to finally take the microphone back. Right now, before you've even finished this sentence, that voice has already said something about you. Maybe it commented on how you look, sitting there. Maybe it's already rehearsing something you got wrong today, replaying it for the 4th or 5th time, uninvited. Maybe it's simply quiet, which men mistake for absence, when really it just means the voice has been running so long, so continuously, that you've stopped noticing it speaking at all, the way you stop noticing a radio left on in another room. Try this for a moment, honestly. Think of the last time you made a small, forgettable mistake, dropped something, forgot a name, fumbled a sentence in front of people who barely noticed. What did the voice say, in that exact instant, before you'd even had time to think consciously about how to respond? For most men, the answer arrives faster than conscious thought could ever move: an insult, a verdict, a tone of contempt reserved for someone who has genuinely failed at something that mattered. That speed is the tell. Conscious thought takes a moment to form. This response was already loaded, waiting, fired from a script written long before the mistake even happened. You have had exactly one companion for every single moment of your entire life. Not a parent, not a friend, not a wife. This voice. It was there before any of them, and it will be there after all of them are gone. And you have never once asked it a simple question: where did you learn to talk to me like that? Here is the painful truth. Most of what that voice says was never actually yours to begin with. It is a recording, assembled over years, out of the voices of people who spoke to you before you had any ability to evaluate whether what they said was true. A parent's frustration, absorbed as fact. A teacher's offhand comment, absorbed as prophecy. A moment of public embarrassment, absorbed as a permanent verdict on your worth. None of these voices announced themselves as guests. They simply moved in, quietly, while you were too young to check identification at the door, and they have been speaking in your voice, using your first-person pronoun, ever since. This is why the voice can be so cruel to you specifically, in ways you would never tolerate from another human being for even a single conversation. If a friend spoke to you the way you speak to yourself after a mistake, you would end the friendship. But you cannot end this one, because you've spent your whole life believing the voice simply is you, rather than understanding it as a tenant you never actually agreed to house. Marcus Aurelius understood something about this that the emperors before him rarely wrote down honestly. He kept a private notebook specifically because he knew the voice inside his own head required active supervision, that left unattended, it would run whatever program it had absorbed from a lifetime of other people's opinions, rather than the deliberate, examined judgment of a man actually thinking for himself. By the end of this, you will understand exactly whose voices are still speaking through yours, how to finally tell them apart from your own actual judgment, and what it takes to become the one voice in the room that gets the final word. 9 lessons. Each one aimed at a different disguise the voice wears to avoid being questioned. If you just noticed, for the first time, that the voice commenting on you right now might not be entirely yours, comment, whose voice is this, below. That question is the beginning of everything that follows tonight. Lesson 1. The voice is not thought. It is inheritance. Most men assume their inner monologue is simply the sound of their own mind working, as natural and self-generated as a heartbeat. It isn't. Thought, in its purest form, is closer to a tool. You pick it up to solve a problem and set it down when the problem is solved. What most men actually carry instead is something closer to a script, running on a loop, largely written before they were old enough to hold a pen. Listen closely, next time the voice criticizes you, to the actual cadence of the sentence. Often it doesn't even sound like you, if you're honest. It sounds like someone specific, a particular tone, a particular phrase construction, a particular kind of impatience you'd recognize instantly if you heard it out loud from another person's mouth. That's because it isn't a metaphor. It is, quite literally, someone else's voice, recorded decades ago, still playing on a device you never chose to purchase. Think of a specific phrase the voice reaches for often, one you've heard it use for years without ever questioning where it originated. Say it slowly, in your head, and pay attention not just to the words but to the exact rhythm and emphasis. Many men, doing this honestly for the first time, are startled to realize the sentence isn't even grammatically how they'd naturally phrase something. It carries someone else's syntax, someone else's favorite words, someone else's specific way of landing on the cruelest possible phrasing. You've been speaking fluently in a language you never actually chose to learn. Epictetus taught that it is not events that disturb us, but our judgments about them. What he understood, and what gets lost in the modern retelling, is that most of our judgments were never actually reasoned, they were installed, wholesale, by people who had authority over us before we had the capacity to question that authority. You have spent years treating an inherited script as if it were your own considered verdict. You thought that voice was you thinking. Until life taught you it was someone else's voice, still finishing sentences they started a very long time ago. Lesson 2. Why the voice is never as cruel to others as it is to you. Notice something strange about the way this voice operates. It rarely accuses other people with the same viciousness it reserves for you. A friend makes a mistake, and the voice offers something almost generous, an explanation, an excuse, a benefit of the doubt. You make the identical mistake, and the voice reaches immediately for the harshest available interpretation, as if searching specifically for the version of events that will hurt the most. This asymmetry isn't random. It reveals something important about where the voice actually came from. The people whose words became this voice were not being cruel to strangers when they installed it. They were being hardest, specifically, on you, because you were the one within reach, the one whose behavior reflected on them, the one they had, for whatever reason, decided needed correcting most urgently. The voice learned its harshest register in exactly the place it now applies it most consistently. Seneca warned against becoming your own harshest judge without also becoming your own fair witness. A fair witness examines evidence in both directions. The inherited voice never does. It was never trained to be fair. It was trained to correct, quickly, using whatever tone got results the fastest with a child who had no ability to push back. The next time you notice the voice reaching for the cruelest possible read on something you did, ask yourself directly whether you would say the exact same sentence to a friend in the identical situation. If the answer is no, you have just caught the voice red-handed, using a standard that was never actually fair, on the one person who never had the standing to refuse it. If you just caught the voice doing exactly this, comment, "I caught it," below. That's the moment the tenant realizes you finally noticed them living in your house. Lesson 3. The voice mistakes repetition for truth. Here is one of the most dangerous properties of this inherited voice, and almost no one examines it directly. It does not distinguish between something being true and something being repeated often enough to feel true. Say a sentence to yourself enough times, "You're not good enough, you always mess this up, people like you don't get what they want," and the brain begins treating frequency as evidence, regardless of whether the sentence was ever actually examined for accuracy even once. This is not a metaphor about willpower or positive thinking. It's simply how memory and belief formation work. A claim repeated 1,000 times, even a false one, begins to feel more certain than a claim you've only encountered once, even a true one. The voice has had years, in some cases decades, of uninterrupted repetition, with no opposing counsel ever cross-examining a single one of its claims. Think about a specific belief you hold about your own limitations, something you're certain is simply a fact about who you are. Now ask, honestly, when you last actually tested that belief against reality, rather than simply accepting it because the voice has said it so many times it stopped sounding like an opinion and started sounding like a fact. Most men cannot answer this question, because the belief has never once been cross-examined. It was simply repeated into the shape of truth. Consider a man who has told himself for 20 years that he's not a people person, using that sentence to explain away every uncomfortable social moment, every declined invitation, every retreat into isolation when connection actually mattered. He believes this as fact, the same way he believes his own height or eye color. But trace the sentence back, and it often started as one specific verdict: a teacher's comment on a report card, a moment of childhood rejection, a single embarrassing memory from adolescence, repeated internally so many thousands of times since that its original, narrow, circumstantial source has been completely erased by the sheer volume of repetition. The belief was never actually re-examined. It was just repeated until re-examination started to feel unnecessary. Lesson 4. Marcus Aurelius and the discipline of the private courtroom. Picture him again, the way we have in past videos, but this time focus specifically on what he was actually doing in that private notebook, night after night, for years. He was not journaling in the modern sense, recording his day for later nostalgia. He was holding court, presenting a claim his own mind had made, and then examining it, deliberately, the way a judge examines evidence before allowing a verdict to stand. A modern reader schemes his private writings and sees calm, composed philosophy. What's actually happening, sentence by sentence, is closer to a man actively catching his own inherited voice in the act, over and over, and refusing to let an unexamined claim simply stand unchallenged because it arrived with enough emotional force to feel true. He questioned his own irritation. He questioned his own fear. He questioned, specifically, whether the harsh. Consider how differently his private writing reads once you know what he was actually doing. A sentence that looks, on the surface, like simple advice to stay calm is often, underneath, the record of a man actively refusing to let a hot verdict stand unchallenged. He would name the accusation his mind had made, that someone had wronged him, that a situation was unbearable, that he had failed at something, and then, deliberately, walk it back through evidence, asking whether the verdict actually held once examined without the emotional heat that produced it. This is not a passive habit. It is closer to cross-examining a hostile witness, night after night, for years, refusing to let a single claim stand simply because it arrived first and loudest. You thought his calm came from having a quiet mind. Until you understood it came from a mind that was anything but quiet, disciplined instead to cross-examine every voice inside it before allowing any of them a verdict. Lesson 5. The specific danger of the voice. Once you can name the source, something important happens. The sentence stops feeling like an objective fact about you and starts sounding like exactly what it is: one specific person's opinion, delivered at one specific moment, under one specific set of circumstances that may have had far more to do with their own limitations than with any accurate assessment of yours. This naming exercise works because specificity breaks the spell that vagueness protects. "I'm not good enough" feels like an eternal, cosmic verdict, floating free of any origin, which is exactly what makes it so hard to argue with. That's what Coach said to me in the 8th grade, on a day he was clearly frustrated about something else entirely, is a completely different sentence. It has a date. It has a context. It has a specific, flawed, limited human being attached to it, rather than the anonymous authority of an unattributed thought. Most inherited beliefs cannot survive being correctly attributed. They rely on anonymity to feel like fact. Jung, pronounced Jung, described this kind of work as making the unconscious conscious, the specific act of dragging an unexamined pattern into the light where it can finally be evaluated honestly instead of operating automatically, unseen, from behind the curtain of your daily behavior. Lesson 7. Why arguing with the voice doesn't work, and what does instead. Many men, once they notice this pattern, try the obvious next step, arguing directly with the voice, countering its criticism with reassurance, telling it it's wrong. This rarely works for long, and it's worth understanding why, so you don't waste years on a strategy that was never going to hold. Arguing with the voice treats it as a rational opponent that can be persuaded by better evidence. But the voice was never installed through rational argument in the first place. It was installed through repetition, emotional intensity, and authority, at an age when you had no capacity to evaluate any of those things critically. You cannot out-argue something that was never reasoned into existence to begin with. What actually works is closer to what Marcus Aurelius practiced, not arguing with the claim, but examining its origin and its evidence, calmly, the way a judge would, without needing to win a debate against it. You don't need to convince the voice it's wrong. You need only establish, clearly, that its verdict was never actually based on evidence you'd accept from any other source, and that alone is often enough to strip it of the authority it's been operating with unchallenged for years. If you're starting to notice exactly which voices have been running your internal courtroom, comment, "I hear them now," below. Naming them is the first real step toward removing their authority. Lesson 8. Building the voice that actually belongs to you. This is not about replacing harsh self-talk with hollow positivity, chanting affirmations you don't actually believe, papering over an honest assessment with forced enthusiasm. That's just a different inherited script, borrowed this time from a different source, still not actually yours. What you're building instead is something closer to what Marcus Aurelius actually modeled, a voice capable of honest, accurate assessment, delivered without cruelty, the way a good mentor corrects a promising student rather than the way a frustrated parent corrects a disappointment. This voice can still say you made a mistake. It can still hold you to a real standard. What it cannot do, once properly built, is deliver a verdict about your fundamental worth based on a single moment, the way the inherited voice has been doing your entire life without you ever noticing the sentence structure. This voice is built the same way any other discipline is built, through repetition, but deliberate repetition this time, chosen consciously rather than absorbed accidentally. Each time you catch the inherited voice mid-sentence and ask whose voice that actually is, you are casting one more vote for the version of yourself that gets to speak next, instead of the recording that's been running on autopilot for decades. This will feel unnatural at first, even embarrassing, the way any new discipline feels clumsy before it becomes fluent. You will catch the inherited voice, ask your question, and still, some days, find yourself believing the old verdict anyway, out of sheer habit. This is not failure. It is exactly what rebuilding any long-held pattern looks like in its early stages. The goal was never a single dramatic transformation. It was a slow, repeated redirection, the same way a river doesn't change course in a single storm, but does, gradually, over seasons of water choosing a slightly different path each time it's given the chance. Lesson 9. The final law. You do not have to believe everything you think. This sentence sounds almost too simple to be the ending of anything, and that simplicity is exactly why most men never actually apply it. The voice's greatest power was never its cruelty. It was the unquestioned assumption that because a thought arrived in your own head, in your own first-person voice, it must therefore be true, or at minimum, must be yours to obey without examination. Neither is actually the case. A thought arriving in your head tells you only that a thought arrived. It does not certify the thought's accuracy, its fairness, or its right to command your next action. You are not obligated to enact every verdict handed down by a tenant you never actually interviewed before letting move in. This distinction, once it actually settles in, changes something fundamental about how a day feels to live through. The old pattern was reflexive: thought arrives, thought is believed, mood and action follow automatically, without a single moment of daylight between the three. The new pattern inserts a gap, small at first, barely noticeable, between the thought arriving and the thought being obeyed. In that gap is the entire practice this video has been building toward. Not the elimination of difficult thoughts. The refusal to let them drive without first checking who's actually behind the wheel. Marcus Aurelius did not achieve his composure by silencing every difficult thought. He achieved it by refusing to automatically obey whichever thought arrived first or loudest, examining each one honestly before deciding whether it deserved a vote in what he did next. You began this by learning that the voice narrating your life has never once been interviewed. You ended holding the actual power that was always available to you, not the power to silence the voice completely, which was never realistic and was never the actual goal, but the power to finally ask it, every single time, whose voice that really is, and whether it has earned the authority it's been exercising over you unquestioned for years. There will be a moment soon, today, maybe within the hour, when the voice delivers its usual verdict about some small failure, some perceived inadequacy, some familiar accusation you've heard 1,000 times before. In that moment, you will be handed a choice you've been making automatically for your entire life without recognizing it as a choice at all. Accept the verdict, the way you always have, and let it set your mood, your next decision, your sense of what you're actually capable of today. Or pause, for just a moment, and ask the only question that actually matters. Whose voice is that, really, and does it deserve the vote it just assumed it was owed? Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire while conducting this exact interrogation, privately, relentlessly, for years, never assuming a single thought deserved obedience simply because it arrived first. If he had to practice this daily, so will you. Somewhere out there is a version of you who never asks the question. Who spends the rest of his life obeying a recording assembled by other people, in rooms he no longer even remembers, convinced the whole time that the voice was simply him, thinking. You are not required to become that man. Everything in this video was the beginning of a different practice, laid out honestly, waiting only for you to actually use it the next time the voice speaks. Tonight, do one thing. The next time that voice delivers a verdict about you, stop, before you accept it, and ask out loud if you can manage it, silently if you can't, whose voice is this, and have I ever actually checked whether it's telling me the truth? Let the question sit there, unresolved, without rushing to answer it the way you always have, on autopilot, in someone else's voice instead of your own. That pause is not weakness. It is the exact moment the tenant finally gets asked for identification, possibly for the first time in your entire life. If you're asking that question tonight, for the first time on purpose, comment, whose voice is this, below, one more time, now that you actually mean it. And if this reached the part of you that's been waiting a long time to finally take back the microphone, subscribe to my Stoic code. Because the next law you learn might be the one that finally lets your own voice speak first.